So turn, if you would, to the blue sheet that you got in your Shabbat announcements as you entered this evening. We'll read its words in a few moments. So, anyone recall? I taught a few people. Kol Nirjeh, what is the first mitzvah you do when Yom Kippur ends? It's not Shabbat, but that's a good guess. Well, eats, that's a good one too. And then you're supposed to take a hammer and build a sukkah, right? Yeah, if you shouldn't be trusted with a hammer, then I will let you give that mitzvah to someone else to do. So Sukkot is 5 days after Yom Kippur. Sukkot begins Sunday evening. It's called Zman Simchatenu, the season of our rejoicing, and it is the only holiday in which we actually have an emotion commanded. We're told to rejoice. Interestingly, Ecclesiastes, one of the 5 scrolls, the 5 Megillot, is read during Sukkot. There's actually different traditions given for why and exactly when. We're looking at it a little early this evening, but I'm looking at it sort of deliberately as we approach Sukkot. We emerged from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur with relief, right? I fasted, I got through it. I had a bar mitzvah student in my office this afternoon who said, I did it, I fasted the first time. You could see the flood of relief on his face. And Sukkot, though, while bringing rejoicing, brings its own uncertainty. There's, first of all, the uncertainty of the weather if you're going to live in a sukkah, and there's the fragility of the dwelling place, right? Sukkot reminds us, as if we need reminding, of the fragility of life. And so we turn to the words of Ecclesiastes, which speak to time. And time in our lives, for so many of us, is an ultimate challenge. How do we manage time? How do we control time? How do we fit things into time? So we're going to look at this evening is 2 pieces of text, maybe a third, but probably 2. One is an excerpt from Ecclesiastes, which is really well known. You've heard it at various life cycle events. You've heard the birds sing it. You've heard Pete Seeger sing it. You've heard a lot of people sing it. And then a really incredible poem. It's kind of a point-counterpoint by Yehuda Amichai, who many of you have heard of and even studied over the years, an incredible, Israel's premier Israeli poet. Interestingly, in a New Yorker article a couple of years back, they referred to Amichai as a secular psalmist, which is interesting. His poems have a religious piece and a secular piece. So I'm going to read the Ecclesiastes. The text is on the blue sheet, and we'll have a little bit of a discussion. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to get and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time to rend and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time of war and a time of peace. There's a lot of interpretation on this. We're not going to go particularly deep tonight, but just really look at what's called the pshat, or the surface level of the text. What's Ecclesiastes saying? What's the message you take from this text? Or a message. There's not one. Merrick's real loud. Stand up. Stand up, please. I may repeat what you said for the streaming. Go ahead.
So I think one thing the text is positive is that there is time allowed for and designated for the plethora of emotional experiences, interpersonal experiences, that there is a unique moment and a carved out of a given person's reality for people to know the feeling of this other, that there's time designated for that.
I'm for the purposes of those hearing the streaming, they're right. There are times designated, and we have time for all of these things. Is that a fair thing to say? But there's appointed times. You want to add something? Go ahead. Come on. Real loud. You can stand up too. It is saying there's a time for everything. Thank you for telling us that. That was great. So, how does that message speak? Is that comforting, not comfortable? Judy. Okay, so you hear it differently. You hear it as there was only a little bit of time, and then it's gone? Is that, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Okay. Wow. So Judy's saying this gives us some balance, that the bad stuff will move on into the good, even if the good, dare I say, must end? Okay, thank you. Don, stand up. I know you have a large voice, but you can stand up too.
I think it says you can't have one side without the other. You don't appreciate one side without having the other. Being in a gang.
You need one to appreciate the other. Interesting. Helen, stand up too, please.
I think what it's saying intrinsically is to appreciate the time that we have here. And that if we're mourning, that maybe it allows us to park our time. So we understand we don't really
Okay.
experience.
So it's to take it, to appreciate our time and measure it. So now let's look at the Amichai poem called A Man in His Life. I'm going to take this poem to be man or woman, but it's written as such. Amichai writes, a man doesn't have time in his life to have time for everything. He doesn't have seasons enough to have a season for every purpose. Ecclesiastes was wrong about that. A man needs to love and to hate at the same moment, to laugh and cry with the same eyes, with the same hands to throw stones and to gather them, to make love in war and war in love, and to hate and forgive and remember and forget, to arrange and confuse, to eat and to digest what history takes years and years to do. A man doesn't have time. When he loses, he seeks. When he finds, he forgets. When he forgets, he loves. When he loves, he begins to forget. And his soul is seasoned. His soul is very professional. Only his body remains forever an amateur. It tries and it misses, gets muddled, doesn't learn a thing, drunk and blind in its pleasures and its pains. He will die as figs die in autumn, shriveled and full of himself and sweet, the leaves growing dry on the ground, the bare branches pointing to the place where there's time for everything. I heard a gasp in the beginning when Amichai says Ecclesiastes was wrong. So, what do you take as Amichai's message? Being human is, what mean? Being human is complex, for sure. Is Amichai's message more uncomfortable, comfortable, real? Clarence, do you have a hand? Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Here it's integrating, it's in conflict, saying that the same hands can do work for others that can also try, so that I don't integrate that
I'm not going to get all of that, but integrating the opposites, can I say, without, I'm not going to do justice to all of what you just said. I apologize. Karen, stand up, would you? Yeah. Janet, sorry.
And that everything in life you take in and it's going to impact you, your soul, but your physical body is going to get older and go away. But everything, whether it's good or bad, is always going to have an impact on you. So pay attention to everything. And then there's no good or bad in life because everything has
Interesting.
a purpose.
So Jen is saying there's no good or bad, and it all impacts our body and our, I lost.
Well, your physical body is obviously going to grow.
Right, but your soul is not.
Everything
Yeah.
that, like he says, to laugh and cry with the same eyes, everything that you encounter in life, whether it's good or bad, you have to pay attention to it, and whether it's good or bad, deal with it.
So Jen is saying we have to pay attention to all, the good and the bad, and you're at a nice piece of adding a positive outlook that Amichai is saying. Something to carry with us. For some, I think, I don't know, but for some Ecclesiastes words can be comforting, that we have time to do all these things, and Amichai's words can be jarring. Well, we don't have time. On the other hand, there's real life, and we understand that. The words that particularly struck me is we laugh and cry with the same eyes, right? As we're celebrating a joyous event at moments or celebrating a sad event, or, we think about when a family has a birth and a death on the same time or things like that, so many other events. So we can take from these readings so many things. We can take ultimate optimism, ultimate pessimism, or somewhere in between. I'm going to leave you to take home this sheet. There's a great piece below it by one of my favorite writers, Annie Dillard, who talks about how we structure our time. And take it with you and take a look at it tonight or tomorrow. But what we do when we structure our time. But time is something we all wrestle with. We love it, we hate it, but what we do, we give ourselves order, we try to make meaning out of our time. The lasting message I leave you with is actually from Psalm 90 at the top of the page, which says, "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." Because however we look at these readings, these pieces of poetry, well, we're imperfect beings. The reminders I share with you are to be patient, to accept our souls, to know that our souls are imperfect, but to take in the experiences and to indeed number our days in making them count and thinking about what we learn from the experiences of our days. Teach us to number our days, that we may indeed gain a heart of wisdom.